Please pray with me. God of grace, speak to us a new word. Remind us that our lives matter to you and to our world. To that end, may the words of my mouth be even more important. May the meditations of our hearts please you, O Lord, for you alone are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. In his extraordinary book, Under the Banner of Heaven, A Story of Violent Faith, John Krakauer tells the terrifying story of a fundamentalist Mormon community with a Taliban-esque ideology that has them answerable only to a God who just happens to speak only and directly to them. Ron and Dan Lafferty are the book's villains, having heard from God that they were to kill a mother and her daughter. And it is a bone-chilling narrative of faith gone awry. In a section that he calls Author's Remarks, Krakauer offers this perspective. He writes, "Those who write about religion owe it to their readers to come clean about their own theological frame of reference, so here's mine. I don't know what God is, or what God had in mind when the universe was set in motion. In fact, I don't know if God even exists, although I confess that sometimes I find myself praying in times of great fear, or despair, or astonishment at a display of unexpected beauty. If I remain in the dark about our purpose here, I have nevertheless arrived at an understanding, and it is this: that most of us ache to know the love of our Creator. And we will, no doubt, feel that ache, most of us, for as long as we happen to be alive. I know that ache. Perhaps you do too. It's a big universe, let alone a big world and a big city. And we can so easily feel lost in the overwhelmingness of it all. And that is perhaps why many people find their way into the religious community. Neuro and social sciences have demonstrated that human beings, each one of us, comes pre-wired for connection. Not only for connection with others, but for connection with the transcendent. The ache to know the love of our Creator is part of what makes us human. That is at the heart of the story Gary read for us just a moment ago. It is such a poignant text. Jesus and his disciples are exhausted. The gospel writer comments that so many were coming and going that the disciples cannot manage even to break away for lunch. And so Jesus plans an escape. He says, "Come away to a quiet place where we can be alone and rest a while." And so they set out in their boat and head off for a deserted place, looking forward to some alone time. Meanwhile, the people have other ideas. You sense an urgency about them, a certain desperation. And so they race around the lake on foot, and they are there to welcome Jesus and his disciples when they pull their boat onto the shore. So much for an afternoon off. And here's the part I find so poignant. Mark writes, "As Jesus went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd." Jesus looks at the people and is overtaken by compassion, lost sheep in need of a shepherd. Theologian and Professor Douglas John Hall, in his commentary on this text, notes that the term compassion is used of Jesus no less than 8 times throughout the Gospels. And beyond that, compassion is implicit in every aspect of Jesus' everyday encounters. Hall reflects, since for Christians, Jesus supremely is revelatory of God, and indeed God's unique representative in history, compassion must be said to be of the essence of the one who created us and before whom all life is lived. And yet it is curious that compassion is not the first word that many associate with the deity. These days, the religious rhetoric that most often finds its way into the news, be it Christian, Jewish, Muslim, or other, manages to portray the divine essence as anything but compassionate. No matter the religion, the God that makes the headlines and those that claim to be that God's representatives seem perpetually angry. The central notion of a compassionate God somehow morphs into a God of intolerance and bigotry. My God likes whom I like and hates whom I hate. My sacred texts are clear. As Anne Lamott puts it, you can safely assume that you've created God in your own image when it turns out that God hates all the same people you do. We see it in all religions. Intolerance, cruelty, violence are woven throughout all of our histories. From Mormon fundamentalists who murder a mother and daughter to the Muslim who drives a bomb-filled truck into a crowded grave, to the Jew who bulldozes Palestinian homes, to the Buddhist who slaughters the Muslim minority, to the Christian who steps into an abortion clinic with a gun. No religion is innocent, having all too often chosen hatred over compassion. It seems that when we adapt God to our taste rather than attune ourselves to God's love, things don't go so well. In her book, The Great Transformation, the beginning of our religious traditions, Karen Armstrong makes the point that at the original core of all great religions is the notion of divine compassion. And that our only hope, she says, as a civilization, is to return to the depths of the theological wisdom of our origins. At the beginning of them all is divine compassion. Nowhere and no way can we infer that hatred can be justified by the teachings of Jesus. Rather, the divine human imperative is this: because God loves, we love. And that is one of the reasons this church family means so much to me and to so many of us. It is here that we are reminded time and again in word and song of the no matter what love of our Creator. That ache to know the love of our Creator is mysteriously soothed here. And then the divine compassion we have received oozes beautifully between us and beyond us. Because God loves, we love, and we are loved in return. I was especially reminded of that last Sunday afternoon as a number of us gathered here to celebrate the life of one of our deacons, Sherry Hatch. Sherry's life had been quite difficult. Few of us could have borne up under what Sherry did. But here among us, she experienced the love of a family she never had. Last fall, Sherry's back began to bother her. And late in November, the pain had become so severe that Sherry ended up in the hospital. Several weeks later, the diagnosis was given. Stage 4 metastatic lung cancer, raging now through vital organs and bones, explaining the severity of her back pain. Sherry knew she did not have much time left. And this community, overtaken by compassion, flew into action. Prayers, visits, flowers, a prayer shawl, a Christmas poinsettia, advocacy with the hospital when Sherry could not advocate for herself. Sherry's bills got paid, apartment attended to, insurance straightened out, legal affairs put in order. Her beloved cat Garfield was taken in. All because this community of faith is here, intent on loving one another as God has loved us. And at 3 a.m. on January the 6th, Sherry died, with Mark Jones praying over her and blessing her into the life to come. She'd been walked home to God by all of you. Whether or not you were in the front lines, you were there because you were part of a blessed community intent on showing the world what God is like. And I can multiply that story 1,000 times over. It is what you do here. I am very often proud of this church, from its commitments to feeding the hungry and housing the homeless, to its welcoming of all, no exceptions, from the many ways it touches the universal ache within us, the ways God's compassion is lived out in real time. In one way, Sherry's journey home to God was a profound demonstration of how God uses us to bring life in the midst of death, love in the midst of isolation. But in another way, it was simply another normal day here at Westwood Presbyterian Church. As Jesus went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. Let us pray. Lord, in just a moment we will come to your table. Tender reminder that your very essence is presence and compassion. Compassion that touches the human ache within us, even through a small bite of bread and a tiny sip of grace. Nourish us by your love that we may in turn nourish one another and nudge our common humanity toward an ethic in which compassion is the rule. We ask in Jesus'